O, pnawn da bawb, good afternoon, Rhys Evans dwi. Dwi'n gweithio i'r Rhwydwaith Ffermio Llys Natur, so oedden ni'n grŵp o ffermwyr sydd wedi dod at ei gilydd i eirioli cynhyrchu bwyd lawn llaw a edrych ar ôl natur ag yr amgylchedd. Diolch am y gwahoddiad. So I'm Rhys Evans, I'm the Wales manager for Nature Friendly Farming Network Cymru. So we're a group of farmers that come together to champion sustainable farming, side by side, producing food, looking after nature and the environment. So what I'm going to talk about today is just a bit about what we've done on our own farm to deliver for water and natural flood defence, ourselves along with our neighbours, and I'll talk a bit then about sort of what our wider membership are advocating, particularly around sort of regenerative farming, looking particularly at species diversity and grazing management and the role that they play in looking after water. So, just to talk a bit about a project that we've been involved with. It's a collaborative landscape scale project. I should mention, I farm myself as well with the family in Rhydymine. We've got two holdings, beef and sheep. So we farmed at Rhydymine in Dolgellau, North Wales. So this was a collaborative 18-month project between ourselves, 10 of our neighbouring farmers, and Parc Cenedlaethol Eryri and Cyngor Gwynedd Council. So it was funded by the Welsh Government, aimed at delivering natural flood management measures on the 11 farms. So this presentation really lends itself nicely to the previous session on nature-based solutions, really. And the idea came out really, historically we've been spending money on flood defence in sort of urban areas, on hard engineering. So this idea came about, what about how we change that on its head? What if we developed some of these interventions, at source on the farms to reduce flooding at source? So that's what we did, and there we are. Best boy band in Meirionnydd over there. Ffermwyr o'r Union we call ourselves, so mainly beef and sheep enterprises, typical to the geography of the place really. So upland hill farming, ranging from the valley bottom foot of the Afon Union up to the elevations of the Aranfawdwy and the Ddiallt. So covering a total area around 2,500 hectares. So we touched on some of these nature-based solutions. So what we did, we planted across the farms 7 kilometres of hedges, around 50,000 trees being planted. So try to be strategic in where we planted the trees, across the slopes to capture runoff, capture sediment and reduce sort of flooding and sort of nutrient loading into the river. Some tree planting as well, fencing off 4 hectares of riparian corridors. Again, try to find that balance, the right tree in the right place. So planting in sort of unproductive field corners on areas of dense bracken where there's limited biodiversity value, so you're not sort of compromising and delivering trade-offs as well. And pond creation, wetland enthusiast, I hope you're happy. We created 11 ponds across the farms, so designed to sort of increase the water retention in the landscape. 6.9 million litres of water is what they hold at max capacity. I don't know, I can't quantify that in my head, but it does sound like an awful lot of water. So, and I think that speaks to some of the sort of psychology around interventions like this. We've got the sustainable farming scheme at the moment, where a lot of my neighbours actually would be opposed to one of the operational activities or the mandatory activities of having ponds and scrapes on the farms. But I think it's the principle of being told what to do, and that it's you have to do this. Whereas this scheme came about, there was an option to do this, and look at the take-up. It's fantastic, and actually I think the quality of the ponds would be much better here. Now that it's our choice compared to if it was forced upon you. So something to think about the sort of psychology of farmers as well. Sediment traps and boulders as well, designed to reduce erosion and slow the flow of water. Peatland restoration that we've mentioned before as well, so blocking 3.5 kilometres of drainage ditches on the uplands. So they're sort of interventions that we undertook on the farm, modest amount of money, short period of time, but delivering multiple benefits, not just for water quality, not just for natural flood defence, but also climate, biodiversity, air quality. Tom, where's Tom? You mentioned about your sort of, there you are, your sort of happy place, yeah? So one of the ponds, Kevin will spend, evenings, hours in the evenings, just sitting there, watching the fish, watching the wildlife. So there's the spiritual and sort of mental benefits of all this as well. And again, there's no sort of negative effect on food production either. We were able to maintain productivity and production on the farm. So none of that has been compromised. If anything, all this increases the resilience of the farm in the long term as well. So these are things that we're doing on sort of margin across the farm, not sort of changing the system, if you like. And I think farmers generally are quite open to doing that. I'd like to touch a bit more now around sort of stuff around the regen sphere and sort of a more of a systems-based approach to farming. So looking specifically at species diversity. So this is taken from one of our members' farms, Sam Kenyon. So that's a herbal A with lots of different species. And I think from the context of rivers and water quality, diversity in the root depth as well, yeah? And having lots of plants with deep roots that is able to basically retain the water in the soil profile during periods of flood, but also periods of drought as well, that is able to sort of stay in the land where it's not raining, essentially. And also from an input point of view, the deeper the roots are, you're able to absorb minerals from various layers of the soil profile. So we're basically sort of reducing costs as well without having to buy in imported fertilizer. So a lot of these would be nitrogen fixing plants. And then just talk about the role of ruminants and grazing animals as well. I know livestock do get quite a bit of bad press, but I generally feel that the right grazing management, livestock themselves are nature-based solutions as well. And just want to talk about sort of how we graze animals and moving away potentially from set stocking systems or continuously grazed parcels to a more sort of a rotational mob grazing system. So when I talk about continuous grazing, it's your sort of traditional grazing management where livestock grazing a paddock, normally throughout the year with very little rest. So it's this principle of graze and rest. There's a direct correlation between that and the roots that I've just talking about. Because essentially if livestock is grazing the paddock, it will eat a fresh bit of grass. In a few days, it will go back and eat that regrowth because it's palatable, it's tasty, it's fresh. But what the energy that it takes for that leaf or the grass to regrow, it comes from the roots, essentially. So you're suppressing root growth by having that sort of multiple bite of the grass. So the principle of graze and rest essentially avoids that. So you're not suppressing root growth, and the roots are getting longer, which increases soil health. And this slide here, my final slide, I think, will illustrate some of the benefits of that. So what we have here is a sort of, I've nicked this slide, by the way, from Niels Caulfield, who I found out that he's nicked that from someone else, so who knows where it's come from. But basically, you've got a bit of a trial here. You've got three sort of turfs or soil profiles. The first, on the left tray here, that's some turf from some continuous grazing, and then rotationally grazed, and then mob grazed, so sort of longer periods of rest, if you like. And then water is filled into the three trays. And then you have a runoff tub and an infiltration tub. So on the continuously grazed trial, you'll see that the runoff tub is fairly full. So the water's not being infiltrating. It's just running off. The infiltration tub, there's a bit of water in the infiltration. Sorry if you can't see over there. You might want to scoot around. But the infiltration tub is almost empty. Yes, my lovely assistant here will turn around. And on the second tub, on the rotationally grazed one, you'll notice that the water is considerably, the volume of water considerably less in the runoff tub. So more water is being captured in the soil. It's being infiltrated. And then on the longer recovery period is even smaller amounts still. And you'll also notice that the actual combined amount of water between the two tubs is lower in the longer recovery period. So where must that water be? It's still actually in the soil profile there. And one other noticeable big difference is the colour of the water as well. So in the continuously grazed trial, it's brown. So essentially you're leaching and losing soil nutrients and minerals from the land as well, which is indirectly then contributing towards flooding and water quality issues. I did have one other slide on agroforestry. I won't dwell on it too much. I know Jerry was here from Woodland Trust, so I thought he'd feel at home looking at these ones. But I think the message here is, again, going back to the psychology maybe around the sustainable farming scheme, and there's a lot of benefits around having the right tree in the right place on our farms. But the narrative around tree planting is very divisive at the moment. It's either trees are great or trees are the worst things in the world. There is a middle ground. I won't dwell on it now. Maybe it's a conversation to have later on. But I'm going to finish. I'm going to finish now. But I'm just going to ask how many farmers are in the room. Hands up if you're a farmer, essentially. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 farmers. I think maybe potentially that's part of the problem as well, that we're not involving farmers in these discussions. I know we have, the Nature Friendly Farming Network, FFCC, Sustainable Food Trust, FUW. We're sort of representing farmers, but actually having farmers here in their own right representing themselves, I think would be very advantageous. So an idea potentially, if we're doing something like this again, and if you're attending, sort of bring a farmer with you. You can only come if you bring a farmer. Something to consider maybe. But we've talked about nature-based solutions, etc. We can't deliver any of this without the buy-in of essentially farmers who own the land, 80% of Wales. So yeah, that's my message. Thank you.